Welcome to the JALTCALL podcast. This episode is a conference special edition featuring keynote speaker Mathias Schulze of San Diego State University. In this episode, Michael Hofmeyr interviews Matt about his thoughts and ideas on a host of topics related to his keynote speech at the JALTCALL 2025 conference. Matt is a professor of German and Comparative International Studies at San Diego State University. By training, he's a teacher of German and Russian. Later, he earned his PhD with the dissertation Textana, Grammar and Grammar Checking in Parser-Based CALL, at the Centre of Computational Linguistics at the University of Manchester Institute of Science and Technology. Matt has conducted research on the intersection of artificial intelligence and language education for 30 years. His research on AI and CALL, grammar learning, online language courses, and societal bilingualism has been published widely in books and articles. Enjoy the show.
So welcome to the JALTCALL podcast, and I'm your host for the day. I'm Michael Hofmeyr, and I'm based at Tokyo University of Science. And today we are joined by a very special guest, Mathias Schulze, or Matt Schulze, and he is from San Diego State University, and he will be our special keynote speaker at this year's, international keynote speaker at this year's JALTCALL conference. Which will take place 18 to 20 July this year. So, Matt, very welcome to the JALTCALL podcast.
Thank you, Michael.
Matt, you are a very distinguished figure in our discipline in the computer-assisted language learning. And for about, 3 decades, you've been publishing papers and you've been very active at conferences and with research projects in CALL, in computer-assisted language learning. How did you first get involved in this field? What got you into CALL and interested in CALL?
All right. Yes, it has been a while. I moved to England and started my professional career there. This was in my first year. It was at what is now called the University of Sunderland. Actually, when I worked there, it was still called Sunderland Polytechnic. It became Sunderland University exactly the year when I was there. And I was still working on my doctoral dissertation. And this was at the time, on discourse analysis. And I had the chance to use the computer lab, which was basically a bunch of standalone machines that were there.
Mm-hmm.
And hardly anybody was using it. So that's how I learned more and more. And then I got my first job in England. And I was genuinely thinking I should be doing something in it's not even research, it was broader than that, and kind of scholarship, very broadly conceived, that was closely related. I was literally learning my job, basically, and I wanted to do something that was closely related to teaching. That's why I didn't really want to continue with doing research in discourse analysis as I had been doing.
So your training was general linguistics, or at that stage was it called applied linguistics, or what did you consider your field back then?
German linguistics, actually.
German linguistics.
So I did my first degree at a teacher training college. So basically, I'm a trained teacher for German and Russian. This was, of course, more German as a first language, right? Because I did it in Germany for normal school kids and things like that. And basically, I've finished those studies, and a year later, I went to England. And that was during my doctoral studies, so I needed to do textual analysis. That was the original plan. I just went to England to brush up on my English, basically. Originally went for a year, but then I got a job there. And after I had the job at Manchester Metropolitan University, which was my first full-time job,
all right,
that's when I decided, yep, I'm going to do something with computer-assisted language learning. And at the beginning, I simply thought I'm going to be a user of these. At the time, these were programs on diskettes, right? And, and so I'm thinking, I need to think about how to integrate those in language learning and what one can do and things like that. That was the first step.
And you were a technology enthusiast at that stage?
I always liked computers, yes. I had only gotten my first computer shortly before because, well, they weren't widely available in East Germany where I grew up. That happened after German unification, basically.
Right.
Those very expensive consumer goods at the time, right, became available. So after I had the opportunity to buy one, I did buy one, mainly to do, so I thought, textual analysis. And then, yes, I learned a little bit of programming and wrote the program for my textual analysis because I didn't want to do this whole thing by myself, basically, and by hand, as other people were doing. But I'm going to invest some time and write a program. I did. It was probably the weirdest program ever, but it worked. And it just took very long.
And how did you go there then from doing this PhD in discourse analysis in the UK to, so you said you got a job as a lecturer in Manchester,
right?
And how did you move from there into more call?
Fairly quickly. I mean, it's very often seeing opportunities and just reacting in a way. I wasn't very planful about those things. So the way this worked is the program I had, this teacher training, is basically like a master's equivalent. It was a 5-year program, right? With teaching practice and things like that. That was simply how this worked at the time. When I finished my 5 years, I started my doctoral studies at the same teacher training college in Germany, in Leipzig, in East Germany. But then after 1 year, I went to England and was disconnected also from my supervisor and things like that. I'm not a very good distance education student, so the whole thing didn't really work out. And after a little while, to be precise, about 3 years, basically, in the job and actually working, I wasn't thinking about the PhD at all. I didn't have any time. I just kind of tried to do my job well. I thought I wanted to restart my PhD studies, basically, and get a PhD because I wanted to stay at a university. I got in the first job without a PhD, right?
Right, okay.
That's unusual at English universities at the time.
Yeah.
I wasn't the only one. I had publications, but I didn't have a doctoral title, basically. And I changed universities. That's when I went to UMIST after 3 years working full-time in Manchester.
What is UMIST?
In 95, I went to UMIST, which is University of Manchester Institute of Science and Technology.
All right.
And it was literally across the street, basically. But a much more research-oriented university.
Okay.
So they asked me about PhD, even in the job interview, and offered that I could do it while being employed, basically, and working there.
Oh, okay, that's convenient.
And so basically, my head of department was also my doctoral supervisor, and he was professor in theoretical linguistics, but had also done artificial intelligence research.
All right.
Kind of very brainy guy, basically, kind of did a lot of programming. And that's how I got into computational linguistics, because I wanted to basically had this vague idea of writing a program that would help students of German to learn to write. Correct. This was about accuracy, basically. And it turned out then to be, I hadn't planned it that way, but very soon I did. With the help of my supervisor, went much more in a grammar direction and became pretty much a research prototype of grammar checker.
Oh, okay. So your work involved teaching German as a foreign language in the UK, and
right.
you were seeing the potential here of AI and of these new technologies or emerging technologies, and how you were thinking, how could we apply this to teach German as a foreign language more effectively?
In a way, yes. Pretty much it was on corrective feedback. the idea was that the computer would give corrective feedback once the student had written something. That's
And
how
then,
this turned out.
can you describe a little bit more about the PhD project that you then worked on? Was about this program that you created?
I have to say, especially from this North American context, to be honest, I'm not familiar with kind of PhD studies in Japan, how they are structured, the programs and things like that. In England, really what it is, it's similar to actually Germany and things like that. You just need a supervisor. You work with that supervisor for a certain period of time. You focus on your dissertation research. You have that project. I did take courses, but I didn't have to. That was for my own learning that I participated in things, right? So you would find the project, you get the project approved through what they very often call a prospectus. So you
Yes.
write a plan, and so that's what I did. And this goes through different stages, and then you do this thing. And so I had to. My doctoral supervisor already had a parser developed that he was using for many different languages, basically, with his graduate students.
All right.
He was an extraordinary guy. He didn't know any other language but English. Probably still doesn't. Bad now, but but he had an understanding of the grammar, really the intricate system of rules in various.
So he was a general linguist.
Could grasp this very, very quickly, basically.
Yeah.
So that allowed him to read my programming code and things like that, basically. And I learned about grammar formalisms and things like that. I'm basically writing those rules and stuff like that.
All right. And then shall we fast forward a little bit, and how did you come to publish? Well, maybe I should ask you. You've been so currently we're experiencing a sort of a new boom or a new wave of AI technologies, right? Generative AI, and it's the big topic at it was the big topic at Calico last week, where I spoke to you as well. And the last year of JALTCALL, it was our theme, AI in computer-assisted language learning. This year as well, our new theme is Call for All. But if you look at our logo, the all has AI hidden inside. So, yeah, AI is very much probably the main topic now in our field and in many other fields. And you've been one of the pioneers really in call, or in talking about AI and applications of AI in call. And maybe you didn't really call it so much AI. People called it iCall or intelligent call, right? Back in the earlier days, and maybe smart call. So can you tell us a little bit more about how your career or your career as an academic and your research career ended up focusing so much on iCall?
It had to do with this job at UMIS, the University of Manchester Institute of Science and Technology, because it was a Center for Computational Linguistics. So my colleagues, some of them, were lecturers and professors in computational linguistics, doing things like machine translation, pure natural language processing, terminology databases, things like that. Others were like me, in either German or French, and then we would either do corpus studies or, like I did, computer-assisted language learning. There was a connection between the groups, basically. And this AI in call was much, much smaller than it is now. The reason why this generative AI has taken off so much since November 22 is the underlying approach has changed radically. So basically what I did was literally, and I wasn't the only one by no means, and I surely wasn't the kind of forerunner or anything. I also wasn't the first one. This had happened, this started in the 1980s basically, was literally people writing computer code. Part of what I did literally was write computer code in Prolog, a programming language, a declarative programming language, so no procedures, but rules, basically. That already says it lends itself to also writing grammatical rules. and a lot of it was for the dictionary, basically. And the sorry, I think this one we have to edit out. I'm getting
Okay,
my
I'll
phone
just,
is buzzing.
no problem.
And
I'll just put a
a
mark
little
here.
bit. That's okay. So I'll start that sentence again.
Okay, yeah, please go ahead.
The Yes, the field, many people called it iCall or iCali, as in Calico, right? Computer assisted language instruction. North Americans use that more, the Europeans use call more. And part of what I did in my work for the dissertation project, one part was literally writing the dictionary entries for the computer dictionary. And they were programming code. So I didn't do this by words because it was a morphological dictionary, so that the words would be constructed basically and parsed. But for each root, there was a dictionary entry. For each suffix, there was a dictionary entry. And then there were rules as to how to combine roots and suffixes, roots and prefixes, in what order you would do that and what it means, basically. And then you would do the same for sentences, right? Kind of parsing a sentence, finding direct object, finding the subject, finding the conjugated verb, and things like that. Double checking, they're called linear precedence, finding the word order rules, basically, the way this is done formally. And that's why it was so important that my doctoral supervisor already worked with a parser. I just, so to speak, needed to do the German component. I could not write a parser, basically, from scratch. I wouldn't know where to start, basically. I could use that. I needed to use the same formalism. There were these formalisms still exist. So, grammatical formalism, head-driven phrase structure grammar that was used for those kind of things. And that's pretty much what I did. And then you have to have another formalism. This was what made it so complicated, to deal with errors, basically.
Right.
There are different ways that people did that. One of them was literally called buggy rules, as in you would consider the errors of a learner a bug, basically, because it's computer scientists doing this a lot, right? And so they would write a second grammatical rule that would be able to read the error and then give feedback accordingly. What we did was relaxed constraints. So you would say, I like the subject and verb to agree a number, but I'm prepared to take it even if they don't. I'll just make a note that the subject is in plural, but the verb is in singular. And then based on that note, I can generate feedback later on, should I come to that point in the parsing, basically.
So it seems like at this stage there was a lot of manual input, right, in preparing these systems.
That's why it took forever. That's why, for example, the program I wrote, quite honestly, I've only ever been the only user. It has never been student. That's why I call it the research prototype, right? It was literally a proof of theory. You wanted to show that something can be done. Would you have the resources and time?
Oh, okay. And then, are you still involved in natural language processing and the modern or today's equivalent of this sort of work that you were doing back in that stage, or have you switched your focus now?
Yes, again, there was. I left. How should I put it? By training, I'm much more a linguist than a mathematician.
Yeah.
And so there are also kind of mathematical, statistical things that I don't fully understand, basically, because I haven't had the training for it. And if you look at the history of natural language processing, it basically started off, they call this symbolic NLP, symbolic natural language processing. It's the kind of syntactic trees, basically, that most of us know from some linguistics class or other.
Generative grammar or generative syntax.
And that's kind of writing those rules the way I just described it.
Yeah.
That's what people did into the 90s, and I surely wasn't the only one. I got my PhD in 2001, and at that time, there was already, or people began already to focus more on what was called statistical NLP, literally using probabilities and large corpora to find patterns. Grammar is basically a pattern, right? And we as humans are basically pattern reading animals. That's what we do the whole time, whether we look at the tree and understand it's a tree, or whether we look at a sentence and try to read it, basically. We're kind of detecting certain patterns. Some of them occur more often, and we find it easier to process them, and we're very quick at it. Other things we find a little more difficult, and then we think it's an error, or we think it's very creative or funny or something like that, basically. Something a little more out of the ordinary. Now, for those kind of statistics, you need extraordinarily large corpora, right? So kind of the early attempts, and I did one of them, it kind of failed miserably, basically. That's what I did for my first attempt with a doctoral project, basically. I couldn't find any probabilities because the program I wrote, the kind of textual analysis program, did find all sorts of things, but I couldn't really do any linguistics with it, basically.
But you learned a lot in the process, presumably.
Pretty much what I learned was the computers were so slow that I processed individual texts and not the whole corpus. Had I done the whole corpus, I would have probably had to wait for weeks for the result, basically, for the computer to finish its analysis. Just I didn't know how to do it. Other people didn't know how to do it, and I didn't have the machinery to do it. And out of those, the one thing that was added with this generative AI, basically, is the machine learning. And that basically means you do the corpus in a nutshell. You do the corpus analysis also by machine. It does it by itself. There is supervised learning, so you intervene and tell it, yep, this one is correct, this one is not.
Okay.
And sometimes it's unsupervised learning, then you need more data and it goes through and through. And it uncovers those patterns, right? And with one version of machine learning is called deep learning. And really the best way I can explain it, not being a specialist in that area, right? Again, I couldn't even explain that machinery. I guess there are very few people who can. And this deep learning means literally that you dig even deeper. The best way I can explain this with linguistics, with sentences, basically, is anaphora, the phenomenon of anaphora. So basically, these are devices in a sentence, or in a text for that matter, but it's easier to conceptualize it in a sentence, that look back.
Yeah.
So if you have a fairy tale, once upon a time there was a king, right? First sentence. Once upon a time there was a king.
Yeah.
He had a beautiful daughter. He is one of those anaphoras. So it's a personal pronoun. They very often practice anaphora. It points back to king.
Yeah.
And we all know that. We have no problem figuring out that he means king in this fairy tale. Even little kids who listen to the story know that, right?
But for a computer, it's more difficult.
Computers found this very hard. Anaphora resolution, giving the semantics. Where does it refer to? What's the grammatical connection, basically? How are the sentences connected? Was with the symbolic NLP was very, very difficult. People did their research on those things and trying to figure this out. Because it's also different in different languages. In German, for example, you have a more elaborate morphology. So the personal pronouns, the he, she, it, basically the third person pronoun, would depend on the grammatical gender of the noun. So it wouldn't just be because the king is male, it's also the noun king is masculine. So the he needs to refer to a masculine noun. So you can work out the grammar, right? Now, in machine learning, they basically resolve that with these enormous amounts of data that they use in these patterns.
For the large language, with the large language models.
Yes. So one of the things I did quite early on when I was kind of playing around with ChatGPT, I asked it some kind of question. I was working with students on a biography of Martin Luther because we did kind of language history things. And so I just asked it to generate something about Martin Luther, basically, just to see what it can do, and when I would get the facts right, I just kind of prepared for that class, so I was almost fresh in my memory, basically.
Yeah.
And I guess it did that in English, and then all I put in as the prompt was something like, give me this text in German, or translate this into German. And the this is also an anaphora, but it's a much more complicated one. It refers to the entire previous text, right?
All right.
And the computer just understood, right? As we all know, ChatGPT or whatever, any of the other ones, they do this kind of thing. So this machine learning, deep learning approach got eliminated, basically, addressed so many problems that linguists were achieving before, and they're just kind of, okay, can do this.
Because it's easy to forget with the machine translations. I mean, for a couple of years before ChatGPT came out, we already had the neural, the neural language processing that we use with Google
neural networks.
The neural networks, that's what I want to say, right? Google Translate and DeepL and these other translation systems that made use of this. And so we've had it maybe, I don't know, for about 10 years already, or almost 10 years that we've had this kind of technology. But it's easy to forget that for many decades before that, computer scientists in NLP were really racking their brains to find solutions to issues like pronoun reference, right, or anaphora reference that you were talking about.
And I think this was always one thing that I think explains the scope of these things. A colleague of mine, I used to work at the University of Waterloo in Canada, a very technical university with a kind of very large computer science school, basically, and a very good one. A professor in philosophy who also did cognitive science, basically, and had a cross appointment in, I forget, computer science, computer systems engineering, or something like that.
Yeah.
His main research program was to work on an artificial brain. He called it the brain, literally. So he was trying to replicate a brain with computers, basically, something that could do everything. And I was
general artificial
one
intelligence.
of his PhD students' dissertation, who simply did a segment of pronunciation, basically. That's why I was kind of helping that. And this guy was trying to program these little neural networks that were relevant. There was to my knowledge, they didn't use machine learning at the time, right? They would literally try to program the neural network in some way, one step at a time. Of course, this takes forever and takes enormous manpower or person power in many ways. And so.
And this was in Canada. Maybe let's just get back to your journey in academia. You did your PhD. Initially you had your undergraduate training in Germany, in Leipzig, and then you moved up to the UK, Manchester, and did your PhD in Manchester and worked in Manchester. And then you went to Canada after that.
Right. Almost immediately after finishing my PhD, this was simply, well, they called it restructuring at the time at the whole university, and including the department where I was. And I just had started looking for other opportunities, and then this opportunity in Canada came along in 2001, and I thought this was a kind of good fit because they were basically looking for a German professor with a strong interest in CALL. They had landed a small project for which they wanted another person. So immediately after I got the job, they said, "Oh, you need to lead this project." I said, "Well, I haven't even arrived yet. I don't know what you want. You applied for it, and now you kind of want me to do. I don't know what you want me to do, basically." And that turned out to be one of the very early online courses for German. So it was a German 101.
Right.
Basically, that we started in 2001, and that was running in 2003.
That's very early, right?
Yeah. because when I started what were they called? Oh, it doesn't matter. LT3, the center, the learning and teaching through technology, hence the T3,
All
learning
right.
and teaching through technology. And they supported those projects, right, and things like that. And they called it the was had all these acronyms. Basically, they had the T5 model. One of the T's I remember was tasks, for example, and that was shortly after task-based, not only language teaching, but task-based teaching, but mainly language teaching. To my knowledge, started in '96, right? So kind of 2001 was very new.
Yeah.
And that model which they had was basically, oh, you have to have tutorials, you have to have tasks, you have to have topics, and there were two more T's, I guess, that I forget now, came literally on disks.
Mm.
The structure of HTML files that I needed to follow in order to write those things. And then it soon became CD-ROMs, basically, because the university had decided that for distance education students, and that university had many, also
Yeah.
in languages, they wanted to be equitable. So not everybody had a good internet connection at early 2000s, right, in
Yeah.
Canada. Even in a kind of densely populated area like Southern Ontario, where I was. And so all the materials would come on a CD-ROM. And from there, you would kind of branch out. For example, for a submission of an assignment, then of course you needed the internet. And the really innovative thing, it sounds funny now, but at the time it really was very innovative. We did oral assignments basically in these online language courses. So there was some speaking in there. All the other things, writing, listening, reading, is relatively easy, right, online. Speaking at the time was really difficult. Those were the days when you had multiple standards, even for the sound files, for audio files. There wasn't just MP3, right? There was kind of this and that and whatever, many others.
Yeah, I'm thinking probably WAV files for Microsoft, right? Back in the day.
Yeah, and well, many students didn't have a microphone attached to the computer, and they wouldn't know how to record themselves on the computer and things like that. And even if they did, they would send you a file that you couldn't open. Right? Because it was just nothing was compatible with anything else, basically. I'm overdoing slightly, but so the university had partially developed, partially adapted that system, which they called Vera. I forget what this whole thing stands for, but the VE was voice enabled. So it was a kind of spoken system. And what it was, you'd pick up a phone, dial a phone number, of course, phone a server basically, and then put in a bunch of numbers like the assignment number, your student number, and things like that, course number, and then it would kind of get you down. And then you would, through the phone, you would hear the instructional prompt telling you what to do as the student. And then we called it the situational prompt or communicative prompt, the one that got you talking. So, for example, you will hear you're about to phone your host family in Austria, basically, who you want to stay with for the next 3 weeks in the summer or whatever. You need to tell them when you're going to arrive by train and ask them politely whether they can pick you up from the train station, something like that.
Right, okay. So it's very much task-based, right?
You have to say at least 3 sentences and kind of introduce yourself or something like that. That's the instructional prompt.
21 hours.
And then this was my clock on the computer.
Oh, that's fine.
The situational prompt would then say something like, "Oh, here's the Schulze family. Please leave us a message after the tone, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. Thank you. Have a good day." And then this thing would beep and you would have to record. And then funny thing was this would be streamed automatically to the server from the phone. So they didn't have to control recording or file type and things like that. and the instructor would be able to listen on the computer to all those
These
files.
are assignments, or was that the
Right.
examination? Okay,
This was an assignment,
Okay.
kind of. This was one of those tasks, right, in the task model and things like that. And then, and I actually also taught those courses as the instructor. You would also pick up the phone and then record your feedback and stream it in the same way. And the student would see that next to their recording. Basically.
And how many students would you have per class then that you'd have to manage?
Oh, in those years, we had many. Well, not alone, but a group would be about, I think in those days, we had 170, 200 students in the 101. And that usually meant if you were responsible for a course like that, I would work with a group of teaching assistants.
Because that's a lot of individualized feedback to give back. On your
and we would split them in subgroups, and they would listen to the yes, very labor intensive, right?
And then, so this was in the early 2000s, and then you were in Canada. How long did you stay in Canada?
Until 2017.
So you were there for a long time.
16 years, yeah, long time.
Oh, okay. So the biggest chunk of your career so far, you
in a way, yes, yeah,
okay.
Turned out that way, yeah.
Or at the one institution, or
yes, all at the University of Waterloo.
So this is a long period, right? And a period in which I think by the end of that period, 2017, we already had Coursera and edX and these different sorts of MOOCs and online content delivery. Right. So that we've seen a lot of change in that era in that field over the period that you worked there. And how did you experience that transition?
Just using the online courses as one example.
Yeah.
As I said, I literally started off getting a pile of disks where some HTML files were in a certain structure, and some instructions as to how to follow the structure. Then we would upload those things, and they would burn the CD-ROMs for us and ship them to students. And
so those were the early days.
We were involved in, it doesn't matter what it was called, but it was called UW1. UW is this University of Waterloo. 1ONE was a kind of online environment, basically. At the time, this wasn't the only university. A lot of universities would write their own, call it online environment, call it virtual learning environment, call it course management system.
All right.
And some of them succeeded. We then went through 2 more iterations, actually, while I was there. The university abandoned that online project, the development, because it wasn't never fully functioning, basically. And it was like building the plane while flying, because the courses were already there, right? And so they bought, I think it was called Angel. And I if I remember right, it was the Indiana University, and they were kind of selling this. This was bought then, I really forget now, it might have been bought by Blackboard or somebody bought them. And the university didn't like that and went to, we called them D2L, Desire to Learn. The company, I believe, is still called Desire to Learn.
That period, there were many competitors, right, entering the field.
Right. They had the advantage, they were based in Waterloo. Waterloo is very much the city also. It's very much a kind of tech center. At the time, 2000, 2010s, basically, BlackBerry, for example, comes from Waterloo. And that was the height of BlackBerry.
Okay.
The head of BlackBerry, the main tech guy, Mike Lazaridis, was the chancellor for a while of the University of Waterloo, because he was I forget what he did. He didn't complete his studies, right? And founded the company, but he was at the University of Waterloo, and he still is, I guess, kind of.
Okay, so Waterloo is also like a tech hub then in Canada.
Right. And it still is, always changing, right, in many different ways. They're kind of there are other internet companies there now. I'm not very good with those.
And then
Shopify and things like that. But yes, there's a lot of tech.
And then eventually you heard the siren call from California, and
Right.
you moved over to San Diego.
This had very little to do with call and such, but it had to do with the job. I kind of they were looking for the director of the center here, the Language Acquisition Resource Center, and it's an interesting. Oh, things are very much in change now, not only for us but in the entire U.S. Right, for a whole raft of reasons, and the main one being federal funding in many ways. But had you interviewed me, let's say, kind of half a year ago or so, I would have said Language Acquisition Resource Center. We do the normal things of a language resource center at the university.
And that's the
Providing
Language
help and
Resource
support.
Center at the San Diego State University, where you're now at.
Right.
Yeah.
But for most part of the work, and you've seen many of my colleagues basically during the Calico conference a couple of days ago, we were running federally funded projects, basically. Person mainly doing intensive language training courses for government personnel, particularly kind of Department of Defense.
And this is delivered online or at a distance?
In parts, yes. The nice COVID word pivot, basically, with the beginning of COVID, which, shall I put it, the lockdown started quite early in California. California was one of those very strict states. Was even a couple of days earlier the lockdown here in California than it was in Germany, and Germany was very strict and really on top of things at the very beginning of the COVID pandemic. Anyway, and so we literally closed shop from one day to the next, and I had a team of 12, 13 people, and we were basically thinking, what are we going to do with our intensive language training courses? We had some of them running, right? We would send them home because they didn't want to kind of, you can do this online now. Go to your hotel room or something like that and lock yourself up. And they went home. But pretty soon after, literally the kind of week or so after, and we used to have courses, and hopefully we will have them again, in languages like Arabic, Korean, Pashto, Indonesian, and something even less commonly taught like Somali and Sorani Kurdish. Or
okay. So you teach many smaller languages.
As an example,
right.
There are no trained teachers, right? To my knowledge, I've never met a trained teacher of Pashto. So we train highly educated first language speakers of these languages to help us teach these courses, and we've done so over quite a number of years, 14, 15 years basically, and longer.
And these speakers, are they international students at the university that you can utilize, or people in the community? Where do you find the
latter? People in the community. Rarely also, we have a few faculty who basically teach a course for us, but it's often not possible for them because we put on these courses upon request from one of the partners. So we never wait for students. We get the request and saying, we need Indonesian. We've got 6 people who need it, that proficiency level. That's the window when they have time for this training. Can you do it? And then we would swing into gear basically and organize that course, tailor the course for them. And under COVID, we started doing, of course, everything online.
Yeah.
Including for the more local military, right? The kind of the San Diego is very much also a military town in many ways.
There's a big Navy base there, right?
Navy and Marines and a number of others. There are some air bases kind of relatively close by. Things like that. And we did some online teaching beforehand because these were somewhere else in Virginia or North Carolina or whatever. And then under COVID did everything online from one day to the next, basically, which was a huge endeavor also in terms of professional development for the teachers that we have. We also did that professional development also for local school teachers and community language teachers, like at the Saturday schools and things like that. And since COVID, basically, it did persuade a number of people also in the military who said, no, we don't want to go back. We want we want these online courses to continue, and they request, right? So they might request them online, and the reason is very simple.
Even if they're based in San Diego.
Yes, I mean, fine. It's still kind of, I forget, 40 miles, 50 miles or something. There's this one big military place, basically, where a lot of them came from, and yeah, for them it's a cost factor, it's an accessibility factor, all sorts of things that play a role there. And we do this reasonably immersive, and have done this with great success, basically. The other thing is, as everywhere else, we were asked also, we weren't the only language training center doing that, asked to improve our numbers, the participation numbers. These are small intensive groups, right? But we were basically told, rather than only 3 students in that group, have 6 or maximum of 12 or something like that. And so we call them high flex, as becomes, I think, pretty much standard. So we had scenarios where half of the group would be in one of the training rooms here in this building. I'm still in the office. And others would sit somewhere else, basically, and kind of literally zoom in. We even had some where the instructor would be on screen, basically, and talking to people in the group and engaging with them that way, literally from like an interactive TV, basically, kind of talking to them and making them do things. Sometimes because of later COVID cases or something like that, when somebody couldn't come in all of a sudden in the middle of a course, and sometimes because of instructor availability, because that particular instructor sat somewhere else, basically, and he was the one who we could get.
And I think here in Japan, we also, of course, we can relate to that experience of the pandemic and of things moving online, right. and then that seems to have made normalized online education and distance education, and even today universities here are much more comfortable letting for example, when I went to Calico for a week during the middle of the semester, I could just leave on-demand content for my students on the LMS to complete while I was gone. So I think for a lot of teachers, this flexible working mode has now become more the norm, and it's something that people are familiar with. But it is very interesting because, of course, for us in Japan, we don't working with people from the military is not a big topic in foreign language education here. Most students who learn at the university level and as adults are either at the university level, usually they just need a general English education, and right. Corporations, even though the working language for the vast majority of the Japanese employers will be Japanese, they do expect a certain level of English, especially passing standardized tests in English. So it's very much it's very much general English, and not so much English for specific professional purposes that most educators and most JALT members teach here. So I'm interested, the people in the military who are your students at your center in San Diego, is there any specific approach or any specific do they want practical communication skills, or do they want to be able to read? For what purposes do they want to learn German as a foreign language, or the other languages that you offer?
Well, there are many different groups, and as I said, these courses were put on upon request, basically, from one of the partners that we have in the military. Well, one group in particular, and that was kind of a big group where a lot of things happened, um, are we went and had 2 years of training, about 2 years of training in the language at what is called the Defense Language Institute, which is also in California, north of here in Monterey, California.
Is that the Middlebury Institute or?
No, but it's in the same town.
Okay.
These two.
Okay.
So it's the same Monterey, but it's a different. One is basically like a 2-year college in a barracks, basically. So kind of it is an army unit,
Right.
and they train sorts of linguists. They have other branches somewhere else in the country, but that's their main branch, and they train them for radio battalions, intelligence squadrons. So these are the people who literally gonna listen and read all sorts of things, which they then summarize in English, and that goes up the chain for information in whatever way is, I guess, appropriate or wanted.
Right.
And they, again, I'm simplifying slightly, but they, of course, also have staff development and their continuous training and education, basically. And so coming to us for 4 or 5 weeks for an intensive training course was basically their main training event for most of them per year in any given year, basically their professional development in a way.
Yeah.
So they would come with us knowing their prior test result in reading and listening. That was also what they were trained for in Monterey. So their speaking would lag behind because they didn't use it very often, and their writing even more so. It was de-emphasized, basically, that modality. It wasn't taught very much. So they didn't do essay writing or things like that, basically. They used it for note-taking, maybe.
And are these languages? Is it what are the main demands for in terms of languages?
That's the thing that I'm sure you can appreciate with the kind of international situation being very volatile.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. That's very short-termish, right? Whereas the military in its training is kind of more medium-term. They do have training plans for a couple of years. Things, this is what we want to do. We need that many Russian linguists. We need that many, they call them linguists, right? They're kind of people who learn language.
And especially because language learning takes at least a couple of years if you learn a language like Arabic.
Exactly.
Or Russian,
they plan it ahead and have those things. And then all of a sudden, somebody changes the mission and they say, actually, no, you're not being sent to, and we've had those things, you're not being sent to Iraq anymore. We're going to send you down to the kind of South Pacific or something. Because that's where you need it, and then people get retrained, basically. The most recently, I guess that's not a secret because anybody kind of watching the news would kind of know those things. We did a lot of Russian and Chinese, but sometimes it has also been counterintuitive. When I would think only a few years back, this country would be wise doing a lot of Korean. With the tension with North Korea also under Trump 1, basically, we didn't really. Because there's also training plans and military missions, and then it depends on with what units, large military units we work, right? And what some of them might be deployed in a particular part of the world, and they have nothing to do with, let's say, Korean or whatever. It's really just an example in some way.
Okay, so that's very interesting to hear this insight from a very different language teaching environment from what we're experiencing on this side.
As that part was very interesting. Also working with basically with people teaching their first language, like we both do, I guess, in a way, but kind of being very enthusiastic for it, but not having had the chances we had in terms of training and things like that. So the requirement for instructors as per the grant was they needed a bachelor or equivalent, so university education, and a very high proficiency, basically. So we would literally have everybody take a oral proficiency test, standardized, not with us, basically. Somebody did that for us through ACTFL and their testing organizations who do those things, basically. And then we would document and say, okay, yeah, that one has superior proficiency, so kind of, yep.
And then finally, Matt, I think we're coming up to almost an hour, so we don't have that much time left. But one thing I want to ask you about that I think is also very relevant for our members is at Calico this year, you gave a panel, or you participated in a panel presentation about a position paper, right, that you prepared with Phil Hubbard and other people in Calico about professional development for language teachers in the age of generative AI, and the basic competencies that you thought were the most important skills that language teachers need in this age. So would you like to tell us a little bit more about that paper?
Yes, gladly. It actually started in Japan, interestingly enough, basically at the CALL conference in Tokyo in September.
That Glenn Stockwell was organizing, and he's our domestic keynote speaker for JALTCALL
right,
next month. So we're very much looking forward to having the two of you at our conference.
Oh, and I really like working with Glenn. Yes, I think we're all looking forward to it in some way, because I also talked to him. I think he likes the idea too. So at that conference, at the CALL conference at Waseda University in September, Phil and I were talking. He wanted to do this paper basically for the journal is called International Journal of Computer Assisted Language Learning and Teaching. I keep forgetting what this is. It's an American publishing house. The editor actually was also here at Calico a couple of days ago. Anyway, and this is an open access journal. So normally people pay an author processing fee, basically. And the editor had invited Phil to write a paper without that processing fee. They sometimes kind of do this kind of thing, I guess, also for boosting readership and things like that. And Phil wanted to do something on AI, but felt not comfortable enough. He knows a lot about AI, but it's not his specialty. And that's why he was talking to me. His specialty is teacher education, right? He's done a lot, especially CALL and teacher education, teacher training, as in training for technology. He has worked with, I want to say TESOL, but it's getting late here in the evening. I might mix up things. He did the technology standards. He was part of a group basically for teaching English. What are the technology standards? They did this a couple of years ago. Now they also talked about this in the panel with Greg Kessler. They're doing similar standards and principles for a group in Canada, also teaching English to immigrants to Canada. So that was our division of labor. I did more the kind of AI part, learned from him, because I have teacher training myself. I've just never been in teacher training, right? We do here professional development courses for world languages teachers, but this is not my strongest area, basically, by any means. So that's how we work together. Basically, the way we started, I had just finished another, actually was a book chapter. It's a book that has just come out on CALL and artificial intelligence, edited by Yijian Wang.
Is it this one?
Exactly.
So in Insights into AI and Language Teaching and Learning, edited by Yijing Wang, Anthony Alm, and Gilbert Dizon, who's also a JALTCALL member.
I was stuck at Anthony, yes. Thank you. And I'd done a chapter for them, pretty much the historical chapter, and Phil liked that one and said, why don't you do the kind of historical part? To which I then said, I don't think that's what teachers need, that I kind of tell them about the history again, plus I've just written this. So what we tried to do was look at the kind of basics of generative AI that we believe are important for teachers. So they're in this position paper as well. Then the other part is where Phil did more of the work. We collaborated on all of them in different ways, but he surely took the lead on the much larger second part, basically, which is looking at kind of technology standards, AI standards that are here already. Like even UNESCO did one. Private companies have done one that do professional development. Different professional organizations have done one. And he looked at the relevant ones and kind of parsed them out and sort of, looked at commonalities and things like that. And really, the main two outcomes are a list of 10 kind of broader items, areas, which you might want to call kind of knowledge areas, where we say, yeah, kind of perhaps even in this order slightly, it's a little bit debatable, but if you have to start somewhere, it's good to start with number one, to kind of say, all right, I will formulate can-do statements, basically. Oh, I can do this now, I can do that, and kind of and move along. And then what we really wanted, and Phil came up with that name. He called it SIPD or SIPD, so sustained integrated professional development. And the idea is that in-service teachers have very little time. And this field of generative AI or AI in general is so large and so fast moving and so impactful that it cannot be solved by going to a single workshop and saying, okay, I did the workshop on AI, I'm good. So it's a continuous process, right? And so the idea was, how can we get teachers, how can we also give teachers a hand in doing this process in a structured and principled way, but on their own time in a way that is successful? And this is kind of, do it in these small steps to this one first. Here's how you can try out things. Try it out from a student perspective. Use your learner perspective. This is one of the things. Look for collaborators and kind of, pretty, how shall I put it? Pretty simple principles in some way.
But I remember you suggested that at the talk. You call it SIPT, right?
Yeah.
I can't remember what it stands for exactly, but
sustained integrated professional development.
Oh, okay, yeah, and I thought that that's
so
very...
the most so sustained.
Integrated.
You can actually do it. Basically, you can do it for a longer period of time. Integrated, you're doing it with things you have to do as a teacher anyway. Basically, that's kind of, I'm simplifying slightly. So no grand allures, basically, or anything of that kind. Simple steps that we very much hope are doable, and that's why we call it a position paper. And those principles are provisional because we didn't test them yet. We're suggesting them, basically, and saying, hey, kind of, and I think we've done pretty thorough also literature review in order to, so they're not just pulled out of thin air, basically. They're really compiled and put together in some way, but more based on, call it Phil's expertise in
professional development,
teacher training and teacher education, and my expertise over a number of years with artificial intelligence and both of our experience with technology and the kind of challenges that are unique.
We, with myself and also my colleague Robert Swire, who is the president of JALTCALL, we were both very impressed with this talk, and it makes complete sense, right? Because the the field AI, every month there's something new and a new tool or something that could be used and utilized. So it doesn't really make much sense to have a one-day training seminar or a half-day training seminar once a year. It makes a lot more sense to set. I think Phil suggested we set 30 minutes every Friday as our AI practice time, and we get up to date, up to speed with the latest tools, and maybe or discuss ideas with our colleagues and brainstorm together. And that seems like a much more reasonable approach, or much more productive approach to adapting and dealing with these new technologies as they come out. So yeah, that was great. And I'm sure we can put the link to your paper as well, to your position paper, along with this podcast on our website.
Oh yeah, gladly. I mean, we're kind of, it's nice to have it open access, right? That people can get it very easy.
And then, next month, 18th to 20th of July, we have the JALTCALL conference coming up at my university right here, Tokyo University of Science. And we're very much hoping that our listeners will also be coming and presenting, or at least attending, and seeing or hearing from all the different perspectives of our presentations. And of course, Matt, you are giving our international keynote speech. Do you have any preview or any? Do you want to say anything about that speech, or do you want to keep it a secret for now?
I will. Well, it's even a secret a little bit for me. I'm lucky enough. I've got after the Calico conference now, and I do a couple of work things this week. I have a short vacation coming up.
As a chair at Calico, you've been quite busy.
And then I'll dedicate some time to actually putting this together. So I've got the pieces, obviously, because I've been working on generative AI now.
Yeah.
I didn't start immediately, to be honest, but must have been late 2023. So I didn't immediately kick in, but second half of 23, I think I started also collecting a lot of material. What I'm most interested in, I've always liked to take a more theoretical perspective. I do teach language also. I teach language courses and whatever. It's not like I'm totally impractical or whatever. But I do like, in my own research, I like to take these broader, and I tend to believe also sometimes deeper perspectives, almost philosophical in some way. One of the things that really interests me with this Gen AI and the kind of AI in general is something that I would call teachability. There have been relatively recent studies. I forget the names of the authors. I would need to look it up, the kind of exact details. They talked about Gen AI with these chatbots basically creating the illusion of learning. That was literally the phrase they used.
All right.
So you ask Gemini or Copilot or ChatGPT or whatever, Claude, anyone, a question, you get an answer, you believe you learned something. But because the cognitive processing, as we know as teachers, works differently, right? Just because we read something in a book also does not mean we've learned it. And it's similar, and there are other things, kind of the way kind of knowledge comes very fast to us through those chatbots, basically. But there are other ways. You kind of, that's one thing. The other one is I've actually done this with my students. So kind of in class, I'd say to them, I said, well, kind of look at me. I got gray hair. I'm quite a bit older than you are. And so it stands to reason that I'm teaching you the right things. As in, the information I give you is accurate and might actually be learned. Why? Because it's institutionalized. I've been doing this job for a while. Had I done it badly, the university would have probably kicked me out at some stage. But I'm still here, so something must have worked right. Which means even if they don't know, they can put certain trust in my answers. Even if this sounds like, if I tell them no, the direct object has to be an accusative. If this sounds totally alien to them, they're very likely to believe me. If a chatbot tells me that, and I've actually done those little test things and said, explain the case marking to me in a German sentence, what do I do? When do I use dative? When do I use accusative and things like that? And the answer was completely wrong. It was actually 180 degrees wrong.
Really?
Like gave the wrong explanation for the kind of wrong object, basically. Literally just had to switch it. Now, having taught this subject for quite a number of years, I simply typed in and said, no, you're wrong. And this thing started apologizing to me and corrected itself, basically, which was hilarious. But students cannot do that. So it's those two problems, right? Is this, where does the trust come from in terms of teachability? You have to rely on, you cannot, like, it's also to do with reading. If you read, well, I'm an old-fashioned guy. If you read the newspaper, in order to understand it, you have to take it face value. You have to believe it. That's how propaganda also works. You have to, when you process it first, I'm simplifying slightly, but you basically have to believe it, otherwise you can't make sense of it. The kind of critical approach, like saying, oh no, this is propaganda or this is fake news or whatever, is a second step. You can't do it at the same time. There are different cognitive processes. Again, I'm simplifying and whatever, but we have to teach students still, I believe, also how to discern information. How we did this with, oh no, you have to have print sources and not just internet sources. Or no, you're not allowed to use Wikipedia only a few years back, right? We'll have to find ways of integrating technology also in this way and kind of basically look to what does this actually mean for teaching? What does this mean for certain cognitive processes, basically? And in particular, of course, for language learning. But not only, there are some processes that I would think they kind of are equally important and very similar, even if you learn about history or something like that, basically. And yeah.
So fascinating, and many of these issues that you brought up also resonate with me, because I'm, my students also in my English classes here, they started relying very heavily on AI over the last few years, so it raised a lot of questions, right? And questions of academic integrity, questions of learning, of pedagogy, and that we as language teachers will have to learn how to negotiate and how to what the established best practices.
It's so basically, when I say theoretical, these are very big questions in some way. The last one, I know it's getting late, is language in and of itself, or multiple languages, right? If I can use something you mentioned, DeepL and Google Translate earlier, but I can use any of those chatbots in a multilingual capacity, right? Changing languages, asking it to translate, and it's kind of instantaneous, and the forms are pretty accurate. And so the question arises, why would I want to slave for many years in order to acquire another language if I can use a little device that used to be the stuff of sci-fi movies, basically, but it's now there. I was just listening to a webinar, and because I got bored with it, I changed the transcript language to Russian because so I was listening in English, but the transcript was in Russian, instantaneous, basically. And it just kind of, it didn't even blink, basically. I just clicked and said, no, wait, let me try this out, it's funny. And so, kind of I believe we as language teachers will also really need to think about how are we going to motivate students to still learn another language. Where's the added value? Where is the thing that you can only get in human-to-human communication that you cannot get through the mediation of a machine? And it's not an easy question. It's kind of, oh yeah, creativity or whatever.
I
These
almost
machines
feel
have
like
already been also creative in certain ways, right?
I think I should
It's
give
given
that
them.
to you as a homework assignment for the keynote speech, because that sounds like a fascinating topic as well to me. So
Yes.
we very much look forward to hearing more about your thoughts on that and the related topics, then on AI and how it's going to impact our field of language education then in the coming years, and what are the main issues involved. So I think our time is up. You have to probably get to bed, and I have to get to lunch. So
All right.
because
Yes.
we have a 16 or an 8-hour time difference, I'm not sure which one to say here. But yeah, thank you so much, Matthias, for joining today for the JALTCALL podcast, and we very much look forward to welcoming you to Tokyo next month for JALTCALL.
Thank you very much, Michael. And yes, I'm looking forward to it. See you
Great.
in Tokyo.
See you.
Take good care. Thanks very much.